The Contract of 12 Sunsets. The first time I realized my life had an author, it wasn't during a dramatic confession or a screaming match on a marble staircase. It was while I was signing a routine quarterly report in my office, the kind of document that smells like toner and quiet threats. My pen hovered above the last line when a translucent ribbon of text slid across my vision, as if someone had projected a chat feed onto my eyeballs. Oh, Chairman's wife is so righteous. She's going to scold the villain daughter again, right? Main girl is angelic. Please protect her. I blinked hard. The text didn't vanish. It stacked, comment after comment, floating above my desk like gnats made of opinion. My chest tightened. I reached for my phone, thinking it was a stress hallucination or a weird AR prank from the marketing team. But my phone screen was normal. The text was not on any device. It was on me. I stood, gripping the edge of my desk, and the ribbon followed my gaze, anchored to something I couldn't see. When I looked down at the contract, another line flashed. Plot correction imminent. Please return to approved behavior. Approved behavior. In my 42 years, I had dealt with auditors, regulators, and family elders, but nothing had ever addressed me like an app warning. I said out loud, to an empty office, "Who are you?" The ribbon responded with a chime in my skull. Narrative Guidance System Online. Role: Primary Facilitator. Maternal. Objective: Elevate Protagonist Happiness Index. And then, as if to prove it was real, my right hand moved without permission and signed the report in a bright, obedient flourish I did not choose. In that moment, terror did not scream. It whispered, "You are not holding the pen. Someone else is. My name is Yoon Hae-jin. On paper, I am the chairwoman of Meridian Maritime, a shipping and logistics empire that keeps half the coastline fed and the other half bribed into calm. In public, I'm the graceful wife of the company's founder, Yoon Gyeom, and the mother of two, my son Junseo, the heir apparent with a smile investors adore, and my daughter Yoon Seori, the one newspapers describe with words like difficult, sharp, spoiled, cruel. I have read those articles. I have watched Seori's jaw clench as strangers on screens decided she was a monster. I have also watched my own mouth, at dinners and meetings, deliver lines of disapproval I didn't mean, because approved behavior required it. The comments called me righteous when I sided against my own child. I had assumed righteousness was a choice. That day in my office, I discovered it was a script. The system did not reveal itself gently. It came with incentives. The next morning, when Junseo visited my office with a bouquet and his practiced warmth, the ribbon of text returned. Hero son is here. Mom will push him toward main girl now. Don't let villain daughter interrupt. Junseo said, "Mother, the foundation gala is next week. Arya will perform. I want you to come." Arya. The name carried the weight of a worship song. Arya Lynn was the girl our family had adopted 3 years ago after a shipping accident left her orphaned. She was gentle, bright, and inexplicably always in the right place when cameras were nearby. She called me Mom with a tremble that made donors melt. She also somehow turned every conflict with Seori into a scene where Seori looked worse and Arya looked purer. I had blamed Arya's luck. Now I suspected algorithms, Junseo added, casually. Seori hasn't been home. It's probably for the best. She's stressed. My tongue was supposed to reply. She should apologize to Arya. I felt the line rising like bile. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, forcing my jaw still. The ribbon chimed. Deviation detected. A headache stabbed behind my eyes. My vision tunneled. My hand reached for the intercom without my consent. "Tell Seori to come home and apologize," my voice said, calm as ice. Junseo's expression softened in relief, as if he'd just watched a storm obey weather. The ribbon flashed. Compliance restored. Reward. Comment stream unlocked. And suddenly I could scroll the floating messages by focusing on them. Like reading a live stream, the system was not only controlling me, it was offering me tools to watch myself be controlled. That was the moment I stopped being afraid of madness and started being afraid of design. I spent 2 nights testing the boundaries. In the bathroom mirror, I whispered defiance. "I will not hurt my daughter," the ribbon warned. "Plot correction imminent." My hands trembled. My heart hammered. Then I did something small. Instead of praising Arya's angelic piano rehearsal, I said, "Your tempo drifts in the second movement." The system stuttered. The headache came, but weaker. A comment popped up. "Whoa, Mom is strict now. Another. Still for main girl's benefit, right? The system chimed. Interpretation adjusted. Strictness reframed as protagonist enhancement. I stared at myself in the mirror. If I couldn't escape the script, perhaps I could exploit it. If every action could be relabeled as for the protagonist, then I could do dangerous things under the cover of that label. The problem was, the protagonist, according to the comments, was Arya, and the system's objective was her happiness. I needed a way to protect Sayori without triggering deviation penalties, and I needed to do it while pretending it was all for Arya. That was the only camouflage available. It felt disgusting. It also felt like strategy. Sayori returned on the third day, not because my scripted intercom call demanded it, but because she was tired of being hunted by rumors. She arrived after midnight, hair pinned back, face pale, knuckles raw. When she stepped into the foyer, Arya descended the stairs in silk pajamas like a saint arriving for a confession. Junseo appeared behind her, already frowning at Sayori, as if he'd been fed a line. My husband, Guillaume, stood at the edge of the light, expression distant, the way a man looks when he's waiting for the world to tell him what to feel. Sayori's eyes met mine. They were sharp. But beneath the sharpness was the same child who used to sit beside me as I reviewed shipping manifests, asking why a single comma could decide millions. Mother, she said, voice controlled. Did you call me back to punish me again? The ribbon screamed in my head. Deliver righteous reprimand. Increase protagonist comfort. My mouth went dry. I felt the script press against my throat like a collar. Then I did something the system might allow. I turned the scene into a business meeting. Sayori, I said evenly. Are you injured? The question startled everyone. Comments exploded. Huh? Why is she asking that? Plot glitch? Arya's eyes widened. Junseo's jaw tightened. Sayori blinked, thrown off balance. No, she replied. Just working. Her hands were raw, the skin cracked. I stepped closer and took her wrist gently. Working where? I asked. The system pushed nausea into me, warning, deviation. I tightened my grip on Sayori's wrist like it was a lifeline. Mother, Arya whispered. Sayori Ani is always so strong. She doesn't need. Everyone needs rest. I cut in, voice firm. The ribbon shuddered. Then a new line appeared. Action reclassified. Maternal discipline to stabilize family image for protagonist's future. The pain eased. I swallowed. I could breathe. I had found the loophole. If I framed my protection of Sayori as stabilizing the family image so Arya could have a perfect environment, the system would tolerate it. That night, while Junseo escorted Arya away with soft words, I walked Sayori to the kitchen, cleaned her hands myself, and said quietly, Listen to me. Something is steering us. I don't know how, but I'm awake now. Sayori stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Awake? She whispered. I looked at the empty air where the ribbon hovered, invisible to her. I will explain, I said. And I will not let them write you into a tragedy again. Sayori didn't believe in ghosts or fate. She believed in leverage. So when I told her about the comments and the system's pain penalties, she tested it the way she tests contracts, by setting conditions. Say something you would never say, she instructed. I tried. I opened my mouth to say, Arya is manipulating us. My vision went white. A spike of agony drove me to my knees. The ribbon blazed. Severe deviation. Temporary motor override engaged. My body stood without my permission, straightened my blouse, and smiled, a perfect mask. Sayori watched in horror. Mother, she whispered. That wasn't you. No, I said, voice trembling as control returned. It wasn't. Sayori's hands curled into fists. Then we treat it like hostile takeover, she said. We find the control mechanism. We buy it, break it, or starve it. She was 19, but her mind was older. The ribbon flickered approvingly. Villain daughter displays ambition. Approved. Provides adversity for protagonist growth. Sayori didn't see the ribbon. She saw my face. We can't fight it head on, she said. We make it think we're cooperating. I nodded. Exactly, I said. We give Arya everything she wants. I lied to the system inside my skull, and we moved the board underneath her. The Foundation Gala was the largest stage the system loved. Cameras, chandeliers, a swelling orchestra of philanthropy. Meridian Maritime donated for coastal resilience, which meant we bought goodwill with money scraped from ports we'd privatized. I wore a pale gown and a smile. Arya wore a white dress with a crystal hairpin shaped like a star. She looked like an illustration of innocence. Sayori wore a black suit and no jewelry, and the comments visible only to me howled, "Villain daughter is here to ruin it." "Main girl looks like an angel. Mom, please stand by main girl." The system pulled at my muscles whenever Sayori got too close to Arya. I let it. I played the role, hovering near Arya, praising her, touching her shoulder with maternal warmth. Each time I did, the ribbon chimed. Affection delivered. Reward. Access to narrative metrics. Metrics appeared. Protagonist happiness index, 87%. Villain daughter redemption probability, 12%. Plot tragedy risk, 64%. That numbered the tragedy risk spiked whenever Sayori spoke to a man in a gray suit near the bar. The man's name tag read Aiden Shin, director of Eastwind Holdings. Eastwind was our fiercest competitor. In the original family timeline, Sayori was supposed to fall for a rival, trigger a scandal, and be destroyed by Junseo's righteous wrath, while Arya's purity shone brighter. I could feel the system salivating at that arc, so I approached Aiden first, smiled like a hostess, and said, "Director Shin, thank you for attending. I'd love to discuss a partnership." His eyes widened, slightly surprised by my openness. The ribbon flashed. Unexpected collaboration. Reclassifying as protagonist benefit. Reduces conflict load on hero son. Perfect. I spoke with Aiden for 20 minutes about port sustainability and insurance premiums. Boring, unromantic details. I kept Sayori out of his orbit by turning him into a business problem, not a love interest. Sayori watched from across the hall, understanding my move instantly. She nodded once. Then Arya stepped onto the stage to perform her piano piece, and the room fell silent as if worship had begun. Arya's fingers were delicate on the keys. The melody was sweet, designed to make donors feel like saving the world was a hobby. As she played, the comment stream exploded with adoration. The system hummed with satisfaction. I watched Arya's face, serene, and tried to decide whether she knew she was the protagonist or whether she was simply the luckiest pawn. When the final note faded, applause thundered. Arya rose and bowed, eyes shimmering. She stepped to the microphone and said, "Thank you. This song is for my family, especially my brother Junseo and my mom." The camera panned to me. I smiled. Inside, I felt nothing but calculation. The system's metrics spiked. Protagonist happiness, 93%. Plot tragedy. Risk, 71%. The risk increased, I realized, when Arya's happiness rose too quickly. The system wanted contrast. It wanted someone to fall so Arya could rise. Sayori was the designated fall. I could not prevent every fall by blocking every scene. I needed a stronger intervention. I needed to alter the world's incentives, so the system's approved plot became too expensive to execute. I needed to weaponize corporate governance. I needed to turn romance into compliance. The next day, I called an emergency board meeting. The board members were old sharks in tailored suits who had survived recessions by biting first. They expected a discussion about fuel costs and port strikes. Instead, I placed a slim binder on the table, labeled Meridian Ethics and Risk Revision. The binder was my trap. "We have an exposure," I said calmly. "A reputational vulnerability tied to family conduct." The system chimed in my head, suspicious. I kept my tone warm. "Our adopted daughter Arya is a public symbol of our charity work," I continued, nodding as if Arya's image mattered most. The ribbon flashed. Approved. Protagonist image protection. Good. "Any scandal involving siblings," I said, "would harm Arya's brand and reduce donations." A board member grunted. "So we manage the kids," he said. "We always manage the kids. We formalize it," I replied. I slid a policy forward. A family conduct clause tied to executive authority. It required any family member holding company roles to disclose romantic relationships with competitor executives and prohibited such relationships without board approval. On paper, it was governance. In practice, it was a cage built around the system's favorite romance arcs. I watched the ribbon flicker. It tried to label the move as villain suppression, but I emphasized Arya's safety at every sentence, and the system relented. Protagonist benefit. Reduces stress, it chimed. The board, delighted by the chance to control lives with legal language, approved it unanimously. Saori became Chief Strategy Officer officially that week, with voting authority. Junseo remained CEO in training, but his freedom narrowed. The system's appetite met a wall. Romance now required paperwork. Comments in my vision complained, "Why is Mom so strict?" But the system couldn't punish me for protecting Arya's image. I had turned maternal righteousness into corporate law. It was ugly. It was effective. Arya reacted the way protagonists react when the world stops bending easily. She cried beautifully. She visited my study with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a porcelain cup like a wounded bird. "Mom," she whispered, "did I do something wrong? Why are you making everything so controlled?" I reached out and dabbed a tear from her cheek, performing tenderness. The ribbon surged with praise. I forced my voice gentle. "Sweetheart," I said, "the world is harsh. I'm building you a safer world." The system cooed. Arya sniffed. "Junseo says Saori hates me," she murmured. That line was bait. In the old script, I would scold Saori and reassure Arya of her goodness. My jaw clenched. I tilted my head and asked, "What makes you think Saori hates you?" The question shifted responsibility to Arya. The system jolted, then reframed, encouraging protagonist communication. Arya hesitated. She looks at me like I stole something, she said. The truth slipped out, unguarded. I held Arya's gaze. "Did you?" I asked softly. The room went still. The ribbon screamed, "Deviation," and pain lanced my skull, but I couched it in a smile. I corrected quickly. "Did you ever feel guilty for existing here?" The system relaxed. Arya's eyes widened, then filled again. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I didn't ask to be in this family." The sentence was the first honest thing I'd ever heard from her. It made my stomach twist. If Arya was a pawn, she was trapped too. The system didn't care. It cared only about happiness index. It would sacrifice anyone to keep the protagonist glowing. I decided then, I would free my daughter Saori first, but I would also dismantle the machine enough that Arya would not have to be a saint for strangers. No one should have to perform innocence to earn safety. The system escalated when it sensed resistance. A week later, a coincidence arranged itself. Junseo and Arya were invited to a televised charity trip to the Lighthouse Islands, a romantic setting with wind and vows. The comment stream squealed, "Ship them! Main couple island arc." The system flashed in my mind. Scheduled event, confession under storm. Required. Maternal approval scene. My hands went cold. If Junseo confessed, and Arya accepted, Saori would become the jealous villain, and the tragedy risk would spike. I couldn't stop the trip without triggering deviation, so I redirected it. I called the network producer and offered exclusive access to Meridian's new coastal security drones, very expensive footage that would boost their ratings. In exchange, I demanded the segment focus on infrastructure, not romance. I praised Arya's dedication to community work. The producer agreed, drooling. The system grumbled but accepted, labeling it protagonist heroism enhancement. On the island, when the storm hit, Junseo tried to take Arya's hand dramatically. A drone camera swooped overhead, broadcasting their awkward pause to millions. Junseo smiled, waiting for soft music cues. Instead, a voiceover described drone battery life and erosion control. The romance fizzled in real time, smothered by engineering. Junseo looked confused, like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. Arya laughed nervously. The comments complained. The system's happiness index dipped to 84%. Plot tragedy risk dropped to 51%. I exhaled. I had found a second loophole. Drown the trope in technicalities until it can't bloom. But the system doesn't give up. It reassigns roles. If Junseo couldn't confess, it would recruit a different man to pull Saori into a scandal. It chose Aiden Shin again. One evening, Saori returned from a negotiation with Eastwind looking satisfied. "Their numbers are weak," she said to me, eyes bright with professional victory. The ribbon flashed. Chemistry detected. Initiate rival romance. Pain crawled up my spine. I forced a laugh. "Chemistry," I said aloud, "is useful in negotiations." I opened my laptop and began drafting a joint venture proposal between Meridian and Eastwind. Shared ports, shared profits, Shared liabilities. Sayori frowned. Why would we partner? She asked. Because enemies are a story, I replied, voice low. Partners are paperwork. She stared, understanding. A partnership would nullify the rival trope and kill the romance arc. But Lucien liked men who benefit from conflict would resist. Eastwind's board might refuse. So, we didn't ask. We bought. Over the next month, Sayori executed a quiet takeover of Eastwind's vulnerable subsidiaries through offshore vehicles. The system tried to punish me with headaches whenever I supported her, so I framed every move as protecting Arya from scandal. The ribbon chimed, satisfied, while Sayori tightened her grip on the market. By the time Aiden realized he was no longer a rival but a potential subordinate, the romance arc collapsed. Aiden met Sayori in a conference room and said bitterly, "You played me." Sayori smiled without warmth. "No," she said. "I played the story they wanted to write about us." He stared, not understanding, but he didn't have to. The merger papers were signed. The system's favorite love triangle had been turned into a shareholder report. That should have been enough. It wasn't. The system's true weapon was not romance. It was moral pressure. It punished me whenever I did something that reduced Arya's happiness too sharply, even if it protected Sayori. And Arya's happiness depended on being adored, so the system manufactured crises that only Arya could solve, then demanded I applaud. A coastal fire broke out at a warehouse. Arya appeared in perfect lighting, handing out masks, and the cameras loved her. The system forced my hands to clasp in gratitude. Sayori, meanwhile, had been the one who rewired the fire suppression system weeks before, preventing fatalities. No one filmed her. The comments called Arya brave. They called Sayori cold for not crying on camera. I watched, furious, and understood. As long as the public worshipped Arya and vilified Sayori, the system had power. I needed to change the audience. Changing an audience is harder than changing contracts. You can bribe shareholders. You can't bribe a million anonymous voices easily, especially when those voices are part of the system itself. So I targeted the channel. Meridian's media subsidiary, Tidelight, produced reality shows and live streams that shaped public opinion. Junseo controlled Tidelight's content as his soft power project. The system adored Tidelight because it provided the comment stream. If I could seize Tidelight, I could disrupt the narrative engine's interface. I began by praising Junseo's vision and offering him more resources, framing it as support for Arya's future. The ribbon purred. Then, quietly, I inserted Sayori as Tidelight's interim CFO to stabilize budgets. Junseo protested. The system pushed him to protest harder. He stormed into my office, eyes flashing. "Mother, why do you keep promoting Sayori?" he demanded. "She's toxic. She makes Arya uncomfortable." My mouth wanted to snap back. Instead, I smiled. "Junseo," I said gently. "Sayori's competence keeps your projects funded. Do you want Arya's charity work to suffer?" The system forced Junseo's anger to stall. It couldn't contradict Arya's benefit. He swallowed, resentful. Sayori entered Tidelight's finances like a surgeon. Within 2 weeks, she found something rotten. Tidelight's engagement algorithms had been tuned to amplify pure heroine content and demonize difficult women. Because outrage drove clicks, the system wasn't just supernatural. It had corporate hands. Someone had built a machine that rewarded certain tropes because tropes made money. Sayori brought me a report, eyes burning. "They profited from humiliating me," she said quietly. "You profited too, Mother, even if you didn't know." Shame hit me like a wave. I had worn the righteous mask and fed the engine. I nodded slowly. "Then we shut it down," I said. "We burn the engagement model." The ribbon screamed. A pain spike dropped me into my chair. "Critical deviation. Reducing protagonist attention," it warned. I gritted my teeth and said through the pain, "We don't reduce attention. We redirect it." That word redirect gave the system a doorway. It hesitated. Pain eased enough for me to speak. "We will launch a new series," I said, centered on Arya's growth through learning from Sayori. The ribbon chimed. "Protagonist growth arc approved." Sayori stared at me. "You're making me her teacher?" she asked, disgusted. "No," I murmured. "I'm making you visible as competent and human, under a frame the system accepts. Once the audience sees you differently, the engine loses leverage." Sayori's jaw clenched. Then she nodded. Once, the way she nods before executing something dangerous. The series premiered under the title 12 Sunsets. Area learns the real world. It showed area touring ports, meeting workers, learning supply chains. It also showed Sayori negotiating, managing crises, speaking with calm authority. The editing, under Sayori's control, refused to villainize her. When Arya made mistakes, the show didn't hide them. It let her learn. When Sayori was stern, it explained why. The comment stream still visible to me reacted like a crowd tasting a new flavor. Some viewers clung to the old trope, calling Sayori mean. Others began to admire her competence. Sayori is actually smart? A comment read. Arya is kind but naive. Another, why did the family treat Sayori like trash? The system's metrics trembled. Villain-daughter redemption probability rose from 12% to 29%, then 41%. Plot tragedy risk dipped. The ribbon chimed anxiously. Narrative recalibration. Audience sentiment shift detected. For the first time, the system sounded uncertain. It had assumed the audience would always want the same story. But audiences change when the feed changes. That was my weapon. Not force, but framing. Arya struggled on camera. She wasn't cruel, but she had been cushioned for years by a script that rewarded her softness without requiring competence. Now she had to work, to sweat, to learn. Sometimes, off camera, she cried. One night, she knocked on my door, eyes red. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm scared. People online are saying I'm fake." The comment ribbon above her head, only I could see it was brutal. Main girl slipping. She's not perfect anymore. The system's happiness index dropped to 78%. I felt its pressure, its hunger for restoration. I wanted to comfort Arya as a human, not as a protagonist. I sat her down and said, "You are not fake because you struggle. You are real because you struggle." The system paused, confused, then chimed, "Protagonist relatability enhancement." It accepted. Arya looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Did you always talk like this?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "No," I admitted. "I used to be on autopilot." Arya swallowed. "Me too," she whispered. The line made my throat tighten. If the system had been steering me, perhaps it had been steering her too, pushing her into perfect tears and perfect smiles. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Not performing, just steady. Then we learn together," I said. For once I meant it. The system retaliated by attacking the only thing it could still control, my body. During a live broadcast, as Sayori presented a new logistics plan, the ribbon flashed. Mandatory maternal betrayal scene, imminent. My vision blurred. My mouth opened to interrupt Sayori, to criticize her, to frame her as power-hungry. I felt the betrayal rising like a puppet string pulling my jaw. Sayori's eyes met mine across the studio. She saw panic in my gaze. She understood instantly what was happening. Without breaking her professional cadence, she shifted her speech. "This plan," she said smoothly, "was designed to protect Arya's humanitarian roots. It ensures her relief cargo arrives faster." She glanced at me, a subtle lifeline. The system, hearing Arya's name, reclassified the scene. Approved. Praise of protagonist. The puppet string loosened. I exhaled shakily and nodded, my betrayal line dissolving. The audience cheered at Arya's name. Sayori continued, calm, saving me from myself. After the broadcast, in a quiet hallway, Sayori leaned close and said, "We're learning the system's language." I swallowed. "Yes," I whispered. "We speak Arya to buy Sayori's freedom." It was a bitter truth, but it worked. As the audience's sentiment shifted, the system attempted a final escalation. It introduced a new author. A man arrived at Meridian claiming to represent an offshore investor consortium. His name was Park Dae-hun, and he wore the confidence of someone who believed the world is a draft he can edit. The comment ribbon went wild. "New antagonist. He's here to push plot back." The system chimed. "External narrative agent detected. Priority. Protect protagonist arc." Dae-hun met with the board and proposed a restructuring that would remove Sayori from executive authority to stabilize family image. He smiled politely and said, "Investors don't like unpredictable women." I tasted rage. The system tried to funnel that rage into righteous defense of Arya. I redirected it. Investors like predictable profit, I said evenly, and Saori delivers profit. Daehun's smile didn't falter. Profit can be manufactured, he said. Stories are what keep people loyal. The word stories made my skin crawl. This man understood the machine. He wasn't merely a businessman. He was someone who traded in narrative control. That night, Saori brought me a dossier. Daehun's consortium was linked to Tidelight's old engagement algorithm patents. He was part of the engine's human side. He's the one who tuned the feed, Saori whispered. He profits from Arya being worshipped and me being hated. I nodded. Then we don't fight him with morals, I said. We fight him with contracts. Saori's eyes gleamed. My favorite language, she murmured. We set a trap called the Coastal Bonds Initiative. Publicly, it was a philanthropy-linked financial product. Investors could buy bonds that funded flood defenses, with returns tied to shipping revenue. The media loved it. The comments called it Mother's Righteous Plan. The system praised it because it boosted Arya's charity aura. Daehun, hungry for control, insisted his consortium manage the bonds. We agreed on the condition he sign personal liability clauses for misrepresentation and data manipulation. He laughed and signed, certain no one would enforce it. He assumed, like Lucien-like men, that paperwork is for the poor. Saori built a forensic audit team in secret, using Meridian's compliance budget. They traced Tidelight's old algorithm code to Daehun's offshore shells. They linked his manipulation to stock fluctuations and reputational attacks against Saori. When the evidence was complete, we didn't go to court first. We went to the only place the system cared about, the audience. During the season finale of 12 Sunsets, Arya stood in front of cameras and said, voice trembling, I want to talk about the comments. The ribbon above my vision exploded. No, don't break the fourth wall, the system screamed. Deviation. Pain roared in my skull. But Arya continued. For years, she said, people praised me for being perfect. They hated Saori for being strong. I thought that meant I was good. Now I know it meant someone was profiting from our pain. The screen behind her switched to Saori's audit graphics, code signatures, shell companies, Daehun's name. Arya looked directly into the lens. If you love me, she said softly, don't make me a weapon. Don't demand someone else suffer so I can shine. Silence fell. Then comments began to shift, furious not at Saori but at the man who had manipulated them. The system's metrics spasmed. Protagonist happiness index didn't rise, it steadied. Oddly. The system chimed, uncertain. Protagonist agency detected. Reclassifying. It didn't know how to handle a protagonist refusing the script. That refusal was our wedge. The audience, now aware of manipulation, turned on Daehun. Regulators did too. Contracts, once signed in arrogance, became chains. Daehun tried to flee the country. He didn't make it past customs. His accounts were frozen by a court order triggered by the bond clauses he'd signed. He called me once from a detained line, voice slick with resentment. You used the girl, he hissed. You used the audience. I closed my eyes. No, I said quietly. You did. I returned them to themselves. He laughed bitterly. You think you've won. Stories always reset. People always want saints and villains. I looked at Saori sitting across from me, calm, hand steady, and at Arya in the doorway, no longer hiding behind innocence. Then we keep telling better stories, I said. I hung up. The ribbon in my vision flickered, then dimmed for the first time since awakening. A system message pulsed faintly. Narrative guidance system entering low power mode. Audience sentiment no longer predictable. Control efficiency reduced. Reduced, not destroyed. But reduction is how you dismantle monsters. Not by one heroic strike, but by starving them of certainty. The months that followed were not a neat epilogue. Junseo struggled with the loss of easy heroism. Without the system rewarding his righteous anger, he had to confront what he'd done to his sister. One night, he showed up at Saori's office, eyes tired. I thought I was protecting Arya, he said hoarsely. I thought Saori was the problem. Saori didn't smile. You thought what the feed told you, she replied. Junseo swallowed. Can you forgive me? He asked. Saori's gaze stayed hard. I can work with you, she said. Forgiveness is not a contract you sign once. It's a debt you repay over time. Junseo nodded, as if he finally understood language beyond romance. Arya, meanwhile, began taking real piano lessons and real logistics courses. She apologized to Sayori privately, not with tears, but with specifics. "I liked being adored," she admitted. "And I didn't question why you were hated." Sayori listened, arms crossed, then said, "Question it now." Arya nodded. "I will," she promised. It was the first promise she'd made without the system's halo. As for me, I learned how to live with the ribbon's occasional flickers. Sometimes, when stress spiked, the system tried to surface old lines. Scold Sayori, praise Arya, restore comfort. Each time, I answered with a different line. A line I chose. Ask what happened, ask who benefits, ask what contract hides beneath emotion. The more I chose, the weaker the puppet strings felt. I don't know if the system was dying or if I was simply growing stronger than its assumptions. Perhaps both. One evening, Sayori brought me a small gift. A fountain pen, heavy and black, engraved with 12 tiny sunset lines around the cap. "For your signatures," she said. I held it, feeling its weight. "Why 12?" I asked. Sayori's mouth curved slightly. "Because your show ran for 12 episodes," she said. "And because every sunset is a deadline. We keep meeting deadlines until the story can't reset." I laughed softly, surprised by warmth. The ribbon in my vision flickered, then faded. No chime, no reward, just quiet. The hardest part wasn't defeating Daehun. It was surviving the quieter counterattacks from people who had grown rich under the old trope economy. A union leader from the North Pier called a strike during peak season, claiming Meridian had cut hazard pay. The claim was half true. An old subsidiary had quietly trimmed budgets to please investors. In a normal world, I would have handled it as a labor negotiation. In our world, the system saw it as an opportunity for Arya to look heroic and for Sayori to look cold. The ribbon flashed. Event. Workers revolt. Required. Protagonist comfort speech. Villain daughter blamed for corporate greed. I felt my muscles tighten. If Sayori was blamed publicly, the redemption probability would crash again. So I rewrote the event in real time. I told Arya, "You will speak, but you will not soothe them with pity. You will announce policy." Arya's eyes widened. "Policy?" she whispered. "I'm not." "You are learning," I said, firm but gentle. "And you have the microphone. Use it to give them something measurable." The system hesitated, then approved. Protagonist leadership growth. At the strike site, workers stood with placards, faces weathered, hands scarred, cameras waited for tears. Arya stepped onto a pallet used as a stage and said, voice shaking, "I'm sorry you were put in danger for someone else's profit." The words were simple and real. Then, instead of pleading for patience, she opened a folder and read, "Effective immediately, Meridian will restore hazard pay with back pay for the last 6 months. We will publish a safety audit weekly, and we will create a worker council with voting power on safety budgets." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, surprise, distrust, then cautious hope. A veteran dock worker yelled, "Words are cheap." Arya swallowed and said, "Then hold me to numbers. The numbers will be public." The cameras captured not a saint, but a student taking responsibility. Sayori stood off to the side, face unreadable, but I saw her shoulders loosen by a fraction. The system's tragedy risk dipped again, as if it couldn't find a clean villain if the protagonist refused to be comforted by sacrifice. My husband, Guillaume, remained the most unpredictable variable because he was the least emotional on the surface. For years he had floated through family conflict like a ship refusing to dock, letting the system's wind push him where it wanted. One evening, after the strike, he summoned me to the glass office, the top floor room with walls so transparent you could see the city's entire coastline. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching container lights blink like distant stars. "Hey, Jin," he said, voice flat. "You're changing the company." I waited. "You're changing the family," he added. The ribbon flickered. Paternal figure activation. Required. Maternal submission. My throat tightened. I forced calm. "Yes," I answered. "Because the old way was unstable." Guillaume turned slightly. "Unstable for whom?" he asked. The question startled me. It wasn't a line from the old script. It was too precise. The ribbon flashed. Deviation? Then stalled, uncertain. I studied my husband's face and realized something I'd missed for decades. His distance wasn't indifference. It was observation. "You've noticed," I said quietly. "Noticed what?" he asked, I inhaled and took a risk, framing it as business. There are forces influencing family behavior, I said carefully. Public sentiment, media incentives, algorithms. The system could accept that. Guillaume's eyes narrowed. And something else, he said. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Sometimes, when I'm about to speak, I feel a pull, like someone already wrote the sentence. Cold spread through my limbs. You feel it too, I whispered. Guillaume's jaw tightened. I thought it was exhaustion, he said. But then I saw Junseo repeat a phrase word for word from a Tidelight script he'd never read. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw anger in him, sharp and contained. Are we being used? He asked. The ribbon trembled, unable to classify. I nodded once. Yes, I said. Guillaume exhaled slowly. Then why didn't you tell me earlier? He asked. Shame rose. Because I wasn't awake, I said. And because the first time I tried to speak, it hurt. Guillaume's gaze softened, barely. I built Meridian to control storms, he said. I did not build it to be controlled by one. He walked to the desk and opened a locked drawer. Inside was a slim device, an old prototype AR visor from Tidelight's early days. I kept this, he said, because I never trusted the way engagement felt like hypnosis. He handed it to me. If the enemy is a channel, he said, we inspect the channel. That was the moment my husband finally docked in our fight. The visor didn't show the ribbon. The ribbon lived inside my perception. But when I wore the visor in the Tidelight server room, something else appeared. An overlay of heat maps and engagement spikes that pulsed like a living organism. In the center of the map was a node labeled NGS Narrative Guidance System attached to Tidelight's recommendation engine. It wasn't magic. It was code braided into brains through microfeedback loops. Subtle sound cues, lighting, reward schedules, dopamine triggers. The comment ribbon was the visible symptom. The true leash was neuroconditioning delivered through screens for years. I felt sick. I had been raised with Tidelight's content in the background, absorbing tropes as truth. Arya had been trained into innocence by applause. Siori had been trained into defensiveness by hate. The system had not appeared from the sky. It had grown in our living room. Guillaume stared at the map, expression hard. Who built NGS? He asked. Siori answered, voice cold. A consortium of content investors, she said, including Daehun and Meridian's early partners. My stomach clenched. That meant the machine was embedded in our origin story. It was part of the company's founding myth, designed to keep donors and viewers emotionally addicted. Guillaume's hands curled. Names, he said. I want names. Siori nodded and began tracing corporate shells. As she did, the ribbon in my vision flickered violently, as if threatened by exposure. Pain licked at my skull. The system warned. Critical threat to narrative infrastructure. Emergency override may be deployed. I swallowed, tasting metal. Emergency override sounded like total loss of autonomy. I looked at Siori and Arya and Guillaume, and I realized we were no longer a triangle of scripted affection. We were a coalition. That might be what the system feared most. Not rebellion, but coordination. Emergency override came disguised as a scandal. A leaked audio clip hit the internet. My voice, distorted but recognizable, saying, Siori is a liability. She should disappear. The clip spread like wildfire. Comment ribbons now visible only to me, but I could feel their heat turned vicious. Mom is evil. Villain daughter deserved it. Arya called me trembling. Mom, did you? I said, no. Immediately. Siori didn't ask. She already knew it was fabricated. She walked into Tidelight's forensic lab and said, find the watermark. The clip had a faint ultrasonic tag embedded in it, the kind used for stealth tracking in ads. It pointed back to a small studio rented under a shell company, one linked to Meridian's early partners. The system was trying to restore the old trope by making me the true villain, forcing Siori into exile and Arya into martyrdom. The pain in my skull urged me to apologize publicly in a way that would condemn Siori. I felt the line pushing up. I was wrong. Siori must step back for the family. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood again. We counter with proof, I said hoarsely. Guillaume nodded. Arya, pale but steadying, said, let me speak. I stared at her. Are you sure? I asked. Arya's hands shook, but her eyes were clear. If they're using my face to control people, she said quietly. Then I use my face to break it. We staged the counterattack during a Tidelight Live special, titled, Who Writes Us? It was risky. The system could shut it down. But Guillaume had leverage. He controlled Meridian's satellite uplink contracts that Tidelight depended on. He threatened to cut them if the network pulled the broadcast. Executives caved, terrified of losing infrastructure. On the live set, Arya sat beside Siori and me, not between us as a wedge, but alongside us as a witness. Junseo joined late, looking wrecked, because the leaked clip had shaken even his scripted certainty. Ione, no, not Ione. In this world, her name was simply a moderator named Hana, opened with a soft voice, then handed Arya the floor. Arya looked into the camera and said, If you've watched our family like a drama, I'm sorry. We were taught to act for your comfort. We were rewarded when you applauded, punished when you questioned. The ribbon in my vision screamed. Pain surged. I gripped my chair. Arya continued. A clip was released that pretends my mom wants Siori gone. It's fake. Here is the forensic proof. Siori's graphics appeared. Waveform analysis, watermark tags, shell company trails. And here, Arya added, voice steady now, is why it happened. Because a system profits when you need a villain. She paused, swallowing. I was called the protagonist, she said softly. But being a protagonist is just being a cage painted gold. The studio was silent. Even the crew looked stunned. The system's metrics went haywire, as if it couldn't compute a protagonist rejecting the label on live television. Then Junseo spoke, voice hoarse. I treated my sister like a plot device, he said, and I let the feed tell me that was love. Tears filled his eyes, not pretty tears, not music-cued ones, but ugly human grief. The audience reaction was not uniform. Some viewers hated the disruption, but others listened. The comment tide shifted again. This is terrifying, someone wrote. Are we the villains? Another. I've been sending hate to a real girl. The system's control efficiency dropped another 10 points, flashing in my vision like a failing battery. For the first time, I felt the puppet strings loosen, not because I had tricked the system, but because the audience itself was refusing to play along. That refusal triggered legal consequences. Regulators subpoenaed Tidelight's engagement algorithms. Class action lawyers circled. Meridian's partners tried to deny responsibility, claiming NGS was experimental personalization. Guillaume, no longer distant, testified in court with the same calm he used for storm forecasts. Personalization, he said, does not require conditioning people into cruelty. He looked at the judge. We built a system that rewarded hatred because hatred keeps viewers engaged. We dressed it as storytelling. That was wrong. His admission stunned the room. It also stunned the ribbon in my vision, which flickered like a screen about to go dark. The court ordered Tidelight to publish its algorithmic parameters and gave independent auditors access to NGS. Daehoon's consortium collapsed under fines. Meridian's early partners tried to settle quietly. Siori refused. Quiet is how systems survive, she said. She negotiated a consent decree that forced structural reforms, transparency dashboards, opt-out controls, and, most importantly, the creation of a public archive of manipulated narratives and their victims. We called the archive the Sunset Ledger, because every time the sun set, another day of silent cruelty ended, replaced by recorded accountability. Workers, viewers, even former trolls began submitting apologies and testimonies. Some were sincere, some were performative. We archived both, because history is messy, and the point is not purity. The point is evidence. The system's final whisper came months later, when I was alone, signing a new charter for Meridian's ethics board. The ribbon appeared faintly, like an old scar glowing. Protagonist happiness index unstable. It warned, voice weaker than before. Recommend restoration of classic arc. I stared at it, exhausted. No, I said softly. The pain that used to slam me to my knees came as a dull ache, manageable. You can't make me, I added. The ribbon flickered. Autonomy threshold exceeded. Control ineffective. I felt a strange sadness, not for the machine, but for the years it stole. The ribbon dimmed further and offered one last line. Then write a better ending. I blinked. Was that the system begging? Or was it just my own mind reclaiming language? I didn't know. But I took the pen, heavy in my hand, and signed the charter with deliberate slowness, feeling each stroke belonged to me. Outside my window, the sun dipped toward the sea, painting the water gold. Another sunset, another deadline met. A year after my awakening, I visited the old port district where Meridian began. The docks smelled like salt, diesel, and wet rope. Workers shouted. Cranes swung like metal birds. I stood on a pier and watched a cargo ship glide in, its hull scarred from storms. Sayori stood beside me, hands in her pockets. Arya stood on my other side, hair tied back, carrying a clipboard instead of a halo. Behind us, Junseo approached slowly, no longer performing, just present. The wind pressed against my face.